Member Matsumoto, if you want to go ahead, and Vice Chair Matsumoto, if you want to go ahead and kick us off, that would be great. Thank you.
Great. Welcome everybody to the meeting. And I actually don't even know what I should be saying, Campbell. So are we open?
I think we're open. Just call us to order, and we'll go through welcome and a couple of quick announcements.
Okay, I'm calling the meeting to order. It's 8:33 on November the 16th, 2022.
Great, thank you. Yes, thank you for everyone for joining this special meeting. We have a couple quick items we need to cover. Jessica, if you would go ahead and do a roll call vote and acknowledge any ex officio or liaison advisors that are present.
Okay, Chair Mashburn. Can I get a here?
Here. Yes,
Vice Chair Matsumoto.
Here.
Supervisor Natoli.
Here.
Mitchoff.
Here.
Supervisor Miller. I show as absent. Supervisor Provenza. I'll show as absent. Board Member Miller.
Here.
Hi, Gail. Board Member Cash.
Here.
Board Member Winternitz.
Here.
And Board Member Sandoval.
Present.
Okay, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 board members. We do have a quorum.
Great, thank you.
Do we have liaison advisors? I saw Brooke White. Are you here? And are there any other liaison advisors or ex officio members? Could you just acknowledge? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Mitchoff, I think you're not on mute, so we can hear you if just so you're aware. I just want to do a couple quick announcements. First, I want to introduce Hassan Herte is our new Associate Government Program Analyst in the program, our administrative program, and he's been with us for just over a week, so he's just getting his feet under the ground, but we want to welcome him and say it's great to have him on board. I also did want to notice that, sorry, I'm having weird little pop-ups on my screen here. Wanted to let everyone know sort of the unfortunate news that nutria have been detected in the Delta now. In October, the Department of Fish and Wildlife had some camera detects off of Sherman Island. They placed about 150 traps. They removed 8 animals, but they haven't had any additional takes since then. So while it's unlikely that this is just an isolated roving population, the good news is we haven't found any more. And there's also good news that they, the overall numbers continue to decline, but they have been detected, and CDFW is really ramping up their activity in the area, their trapping and camera activity. So, all right, so with that, I think we're ready to move on to the other components of the agenda. Sandy?
Great. I think we wanted to check for public comment.
If anyone has public comment at this time, you can raise your hand through Teams, but I do not see any in our inbox.
Great. I'm not seeing any, so we'll move on to the approval of the consent calendar, the approval of the minutes from the July 26th board meeting.
I think that's I think you might be looking at the wrong agenda.
You know what? I am.
I'm trying to, I had mine pulled up and then now it's.
Why is that? Sorry about that.
No worries.
So do we want?
Well, we'll just acknowledge that I did see Bruce Blodgett come in liaison advisor.
Okay, great. And I think
Bruce.
Great. Okay, so Sandy, I think we finished public comment, and so now it is item number 4. Consideration of staff funding recommendation for the 2023 Delta Drought Response Pilot Program, and Martha's going to kick that off.
Wonderful, thank you. Good morning, board members. And I thank my friend Rachel in advance for being the PowerPoint Guru here. Good morning, board members. My name is Martha Ozenoff, and I'm the Conservancy's Community Project Supervisor. I'm here to present Agenda Item 4, consideration of staff funding for the 2023 Delta Drought Response Pilot Program, which can be found starting on page 3 of your agenda packet. Next slide, please. I'd like to start with a quick thank you of our collaborators, the California Department of Water Resources, for providing funds to extend the project for an additional year, as well as the Office of the Delta Water Master, the Delta Water Users, the Nature Conservancy, California Department of Food and Agriculture, UC Cooperative Extension, UC Davis, and UC Merced. Next slide, please. As mentioned, this year is year 2 of the pilot project, and the goals for the 2023 water year are to promote farming practices that conserve water when compared to business as usual, to protect delta water quality from salinity intrusion, to promote soil health, and to mitigate the impacts of the drought on fish and bird species. Water conserved through incentivized actions will not be available for diversion or export. The next slide, please. This year's program provides $10.85 million in grants. Participation was solicited through a reverse auction, meaning there is one buyer, the state of California, and many potential sellers represented by Delta farmers. In our case, the farmers were bidding to determine the price they will be compensated for implementing various water conservation practices. As part of the reverse auction, we implemented a market clearing price for each of the proposed water saving practices, and anyone who bid at or below the market clearing price received a grant. We were hopeful that by using a reverse auction, we would increase competition, allowing us to fund more projects. And given that we'll be enrolling more than double the acres this year over last, we feel confident that this approach was successful. Additionally, we provided incentive payments to farmers that are willing to further shift practices to improve conditions for migratory birds. Farmers were offered $75 an acre for shallow flooding in either the spring or fall, and $40 an acre to provide nesting cover. Providing the bird benefit incentive allows us to achieve the dual objectives of water conservation, while at the same time providing critical habitat for drought-stressed migratory birds as they travel along the Pacific Flyway. Lastly, bids were selected on a combination of factors: estimated water savings per acre, geographic diversity of the bids, and the diversity of water saving practices across the program. Next slide, please. In a change from last year, the program was open for a set period, October 3rd to October 18th, instead of on a rolling basis. Between the 18th and today's board meeting, the selection committee, the members of which I listed earlier, met 3 times to review all of the bids. Using the optimization model that Rachel will discuss in more detail next, the committee formed a list of selected bids, which is the basis of our recommendation today. To that end, I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Rachel to discuss the committee's approach to bid selection.
Excellent. Thank you, Martha. Morning, board members. My name is Rachel Wigginton. I'm a senior environmental scientist with the Delta Conservancy, and I'm going to discuss our approach to the recommendations that are before you today. So once bidding closed on October 18th, a team of staff from the Delta Conservancy and the Office of the Delta Water Master reviewed all of the submitted bids. The proposed action from each of the bids was reviewed 3 different times before being categorized into one of 4 different water conservation practices. Deficit irrigation bids proposed to forego a portion of the normal irrigation cycle. Bids to forego a cash crop proposed to leave fields fallow or to forego a double crop. Bids to shift crop type proposed to shift to a low or no irrigation crop type in place of a more water-intensive crop. Finally, about a dozen bids were categorized as other because of the unique water savings practices they proposed. Some of these were deficit irrigation of permanent crops, changing irrigation methods, or adding soil amendments. This team, with the help of a student assistant from UC Merced, also examined all maps submitted by the bidders and calculated the total acreage of each bid using Google Earth Pro. Bids were disqualified if they didn't meet the minimum qualification of being 100 contiguous acres. So after this initial round of review, we were left with 109 qualifying bids from 54 unique bidders requesting over $15 million. In this table, you see the distribution of these bids across the different water conservation practice types, which are listed in the first column. I'd like to briefly note that if you were to total up that unique bidder column, it won't exactly match the figure from the bullet points above, and this is because individual bidders repeated across practice types. Similarly, for the acre column, that isn't going to total to exactly 29,354 acres because bird benefits were generally proposed as part of another bid and will occur on the same acres as another proposed water conservation practice. So in order to take those 109 bids and determine how to allocate the available funding, a selection committee, who Martha mentioned earlier, which was made up of state and NGO partners, scientists and economists, agricultural extension specialists, and academic researchers, met 3 different times to assess these bids. The recommendations of this group, which are before you for consideration today, were developed by using an optimization model. The constraints put on the model, such as not awarding more than 1,000 acres to a single bidder, are described in more detail in your staff recommendation. But in short, the optimization model selected the combination of bids that maximized water savings per dollar and determined a clearing price to be paid for each individual water conservation practice. The optimization model used water savings estimates from each conservation practice that were developed by the 2022 DRIP Oversight Committee. The model used these water savings estimates, which were based on last year's data from last year's program, and multiplied them by acres bid in each bid to estimate potential water savings for each of the bids that we received this year. Bids were then ranked by their potential water savings, and the model worked to accept as many bids as possible up to the point where selecting additional bids would increase the clearing price too much and the total awards would exceed the total budget. Thus, for bidders, bidding too high reduced the chances of selection, and bidding too low could lead to being offered a grant that does not actually provide an incentive for the bidder. For practices under that other category, where there was no data from 2022 to inform the optimization model, the selection committee used their expert judgment to evaluate each bid and set a clearing price for like practices. Based on this systematic process and the expert advice of the selection committee, staff recommends 64 bids for funding to implement water conservation practices on over 20,000 acres in the Delta. This table shows the number of bids, acreage, and respective clearing prices to be paid for each water conservation practice. In 2022, we awarded 33 grants for 8,800 acres. So this recommendation represents a near doubling of grants and a more than doubling of enrolled acreage when compared to last year. As Martha mentioned before, by implementing the reverse auction with a market clearing price, it was our goal to be able to enroll more acres in the program, thus potentially saving more water. We feel these results are a strong step forward in that effort. With that, I'll hand it back over to Martha.
Great, thanks so much, Rachel. Next, I'd like to provide a quick walkthrough of the bid tables provided in your packet on pages 7 through 15. It's also projected on your screen. Thank you, Rachel. As Rachel mentioned, we are recommending that 64 bids be approved for funding. The recommended projects are listed on Table 1 and are grouped by the bidder's proposed water action. The table provides the bidder's name, the county, a brief project description, and the total approve up to amount, which is based on the recommendations of the selection committee and adopted by Conservancy staff. Table 2, starting on page 11 of your packet, lists 12 projects that were deemed ineligible, either because they were a duplicate entry, or the applicant failed to bid 100 contiguous acres. Lastly, Table 3 on pages 12 through 15 lists the projects that were not recommended for funding. Projects that fell into this category either bid over the market clearing price or represent a bidder that collectively bid over 1,000 acres. At this point, I'd like to pause to take comments or questions. It looks
Martha,
like,
can you hear me?
yeah, thank you, Dolly. Yep.
Okay. I have a question. I love the table. When I look at the map, are you finding that there's particular areas where one of the four strategies was more heavily used than another?
I'm going to defer to Rachel on that, or Campbell.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Rachel.
And you're on mute.
Yes, I'm just pulling up my table here. So in general, Dolly, I really appreciate that question. We found that we were getting a pretty good spread across the different counties, particularly, there we go. So your question was about the particular water conservation practices. So for shifting crop type, that feels like we have a very good spread across the Delta. Similarly, for foregoing a cash crop, there might be a little bit of a concentration, but it is spread across the Delta with awards in the South Delta, the Central Delta, and the North Delta. And then finally, deficit irrigation can be found again across the North, Central, and South Delta. So while it's impossible to get a completely even spread across the entire geographic area, that was one of our goals this year so that we could continue to assess the effectiveness of those different practices and take geographic location into account.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the answer.
This is Member Natoli. I just had a question about, again, looking at the map, and thank you for the map. That was helpful. I know you put that together last year as well. Again, I have no way of knowing exactly which proposal it was, but for the ones on Sherman Island, there's one red splotch there on Sherman, which is largely owned by the state. I know they've done, environmental restoration efforts. There's a lot of pasture. I'm curious, what is the proposal that's on Sherman Island? It's a pretty good sizable amount of acreage, and is that the state? Did the state apply, or is there a tenant farmer there?
Yeah, Don. Most all of the farmers on Sherman Island are tenant farmers. They're lessee farmers. So Rachel could probably pull that one up and get a little more information. But if that's the basis of your or the concern, it would be a tenant farmer.
Oh yeah, I'm okay with that. Again, I guess because obviously they have to pay the state for the use of the land. I assume there's a underlying lease. Is that accurate, Campbell?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I just didn't know what the cropping pattern was in the middle of Sherman Island, so I was just curious if it was a crop shift or it was bird friendly or whatever. So it's fine. Again, I don't want to tie up. I know we got a whole package here, and again, I think it was a good body of work, and appreciate the efforts that went into it. So anyway, that's all I had. Thanks.
Go ahead, Leo. You're still on mute.
I'd just like an explanation again. I just want to make sure I understand what were the basis for the rejected bids.
Essentially,
I'll have Rachel can hop in on this as well. The short answer is that they were either over the market clearing price, so they bid a price over the amount that we set, or they collectively had over 1,000 acres in there, and so people could bid more than once and more than one practice. And so say they bid all four practices, for, I'm not great at math, so let's just say for, $600 or 600 acres. So that would total more than, so 4 times 6 is 1,200. So they're 200 acres over. So that would, yeah. I should have left this to Rachel. Rachel, anything to add on that one?
Well, Leo, does that address your question?
It does, and a follow-up question is, were these folks given the opportunity to readjust their bids? I guess the time frame was short, right? It was about 15 days or 14 days.
Correct. Yeah, there was no opportunity to rebid. Your bid was your bid.
Thank you.
I will say that Rachel and her team worked really diligently with farmers if there was a question on a map or if there was a question. So tried to make the bids, sort of within the realm of fairness work. And some people did intentionally bid over 1,000 acres because they thought, well, maybe one practice will be accepted over another. And so that gave them a wider chance to be included at a higher level.
Thank you.
One quick thing for me, I'm super impressed by the speed with which this came together and the fact that you all were able to double the acreage and bring in even more participants is just really, really amazing, especially kind of in this emergency reactionary drought response type of an environment. And I guess I would encourage you, Campbell, to brag openly about this, because there are a lot of state agencies out there trying to deploy tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars very quickly. And you guys have figured out how to pivot and to learn and to improve year over year in a way that I think is a great model for other agencies to think about. It's I really commend the staff and your leadership, Campbell, for doing, trying new things and thinking about things in a new and innovative way. I'm definitely curious to hear once we have the data what the kind of water volumetric results are from this and from last year. But I really appreciate the experimentation and the seeking efficiency. I mean, it's easy to spend money in sloppy ways, but this is you're really showing efficiency and a drive to really focus on the results and to try to achieve a more efficient way of doing that. So I'm really psyched about that.
Yeah, thank you, Sandy. We appreciate that, and we are trying to tout that wherever we can. But I also definitely want to extend all that same sentiment towards all the partners, the Water Master's Office, DWR, all the partners who came together and worked really hard together to make this work, including the Nature Conservancy. And the Nature Conservancy actually developed the optimization model that was utilized here that was just invaluable in this process. So thanks to everyone involved. Are there any more questions? Martha, did you want to go ahead? I guess pause one last time for last questions.
Yeah, any more? It looks like we're not seeing any hands raised. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Before I proceed to reading the suggested motion language on page 5 in your agenda packet, we have some additional language we would like you to consider. As happened with last year's program, we anticipate having one or more projects that won't make it to the grant agreement stage, which will likely result in additional funds becoming available for award. Given that, we'd like board approval to allow staff to work with the chair and vice chair to approve these additional projects. This request is reflected in the second part of the suggested motion language that, unless there are questions, I will now read. So I'll pause to see if anybody has questions about that. Okay, it looks like none. So I will go ahead and read it, and I think there's a chance to discuss it if there's some questions about that second part of it. So move to award funding up to $10,857,862 to the recommended projects listed on Table 1 from the 2023 Delta Drought Response Pilot Program Fund. Furthermore, if additional funds become available, the board grants staff the authority to work with the Conservancy chair and vice chair to approve additional grants to expend the available budget.
Any questions or a motion on this?
I'm going to move the item.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Supervisor Mitchoff and a second by Chair Mashburn. I'll take the roll call. Chair Mashburn,
Aye.
Aye. Vice Chair Matsumoto,
Yes.
Supervisor Natoli,
Aye.
Supervisor Mitchoff,
Yes.
Supervisor Miller is absent. Supervisor
No,
Provenza is
no,
absent.
Supervisor Miller is here.
Oh,
Hi, Kathy. I did not catch you.
Hi, I
Can
don't
you
know.
tell me about
I'm
when you
thinking-
arrived?
Yeah, I got in about 2 minutes later and I don't think my video is sharing. I'm not
You're good.
quite sure why, but at
We
least
can see
my
it.
audio is. I can see all of you.
Perfect. So I'll put you
We
in at
can see you too.
8:35.
Yeah.
There you are. I'm so sorry. So
That's okay.
Supervisor Miller is aye. Supervisor Provenza still absent. Okay. Board Member Miller.
Aye.
Board Member Cash.
Aye.
Board Member Winternitz.
Aye.
And Board Member Sandoval.
Yes.
So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 ayes.
Alert
The
from
motion-
calendar.
The
Margaret.
motion carries unanimously.
great. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Now from the right agenda, I think we're moving on to item 5, consideration of updates to the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta Conservancy General Grant Guidelines. Campbell?
Okay, thank
I'm
you.
gonna, Campbell, before you move forward, it's almost 9 o'clock and you know I have a hard 9:15 stop. Do we have a quorum if I had to leave?
We do. Yes, thank you, Karen.
We do
And
have a
I'll-
quorum if I have to
yeah.
leave?
Yes.
All right.
And we'll try to,
The meeting actually starts at 9, so I'm gonna wish everybody happy holidays and I'll hope to see you soon. Thank you.
thank you,
Bye-bye.
Karen.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care, Karen. Bye.
Okay, so this item starts on page 25 of your board packet, and the staff recommendation is that the board approve the revisions to the general grant guidelines. We've made a series of updates to the general grant guidelines, and the board originally approved these back in January of this year. You'll recall the general grant guidelines were developed to support projects that are that we're funding with general fund, some of the sources that we've received recently. So last year, we received 5.2 million in climate resilience, public access, and natural resource management funds, which we refer to as CAR funds. This year, we've received 6.1 million in CAR funds, as well as $36 million in nature-based solution wetland restoration funds. So the next agenda item will be solicitation notices for both of those funds. So to effectively manage these funding sources and address recent statewide diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, we've made the following changes to the general grant guidelines that I'm just going to quickly describe for you. And they're actually included in the attached document, which is in track changes if you want to see the specific changes. So to be able to more effectively manage the resource, we have on page 8, we've included the ability for the executive officer in coordination with the chair and the vice chair to approve small grants less than $50,000 for time-sensitive projects. And again, in coordination with the chair and the vice chair to get approval for those projects. This is very similar to our delegation authority, which gives us the authority to spend up to $150,000 for contracts. So this is just giving us some of the same flexibility for grant awards. An example, recently we had a project that came through that was looking for funding to be able to do a third-party validation of wetland credits on a wetland project. There was a time-sensitive nature to this. Because of that time-sensitive nature and contracting issues, there was no way that we were going to be able to get a contract in place to be able to move these funds to support the project. CAR funding was a perfect alignment for this. It would have been a great funding source, but we had no way to actually rapidly approve a small grant. So again, really just looking for that flexibility. We put it at $50,000, recognizing that the board's main function for the Conservancy is approving grant funding. So we wanted to keep it relatively small, but keep that type of flexibility. So the second thing that we changed was back in October, we reported that the governor's directive on equity had come out and that we had produced our initial equity plan. One of the improvement for equitable distribution of funding is reducing the barriers to receiving state funding. So a significantly recognized challenge is the fact that we require payments in arrear and we do quarterly invoicing. And this puts an excessive strain on many of the small organizations that we're actually trying to be able to move money to. So on page 17, we've added language that allows a grantee to request advance payment or monthly invoicing when our standard practices would prohibit successful completion of a project. Item number 3 on pages 9 and 22, also responsive to the governor's directive on equity. We've added language to more directly instruct our applicants to consider and work with disadvantaged communities, communities of color, Native American tribes and tribal communities, but then also to demonstrate to us through the application process how that coordination and how that work is happening. And lastly, on page 19, we've added language that allows indirect costs for our applicants that exceed 20% to be covered or to be recognized as cost share within the application. So we can only reimburse up to 20%, but if they have a higher indirect cost rate, they can calculate that out and that can be recognized as cost share, but can't be reimbursed by us. So just a small change that provides a little more flexibility. So those are the 4 changes to the general grant guidelines that you all approved back in January. I'll pause there before reading through the suggested motion language for any questions or concerns. Sandy?
Yeah, one question on the 20%. Where does that number come from? And the reason I'm asking is as we try to think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it seems like there may be situations where we might want to consider providing more capacity on the capacity end of things for smaller organizations, or so I wondered where that hard number came from.
It's a good question. I'm going to defer to Sarah or Sarah, is that one that you can field?
I believe it's a state requirement. I could be wrong. I believe it could be from the proposition bonds as well, or the bonds that we have. I could look into that more closely, but I know that's kind of a standard for the Conservancy is the 20% indirect. I could look into that more.
Have we had a situation where anyone's asked for more? I mean, maybe I'm on a moot issue.
Yes, it happens pretty frequently.
And would it be the case with these general fund funds that we would have more flexibility to consider a number that's not capped at 20?
I can look into that to see if that's an option to go above 20% for general funds. And if it is, then we can reflect that in the grant guidelines and bring it forward to the board.
Yeah, I mean, not for right now, but I'd be curious to just understand that a little bit. Thank you.
Nicole, you've unmuted there. Did you want to chime in on this?
Not necessarily. I was just going to, is the 20% the indirect cost? Is that what you're talking about?
It is, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't recall either. I think that may very well have been something that came out of the proposition language from Prop 1, and that got carried forward. But during that time, there was also quite a bit of work that I did with legal counsel for resources to try to come up with practices that were, sound and kind of consistent statewide. And so it may also have been part of that effort. So we'd have to go back and look, but we can go back and look at that.
Any other questions? Concerns? Okay, hearing none, I will read the suggested language. Move that the board approve the updates to the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta Conservancy General Grant Guidelines for use in granting funds that are not subject to more specific requirements.
Do we have a motion?
Sandoval will move that, or Leo can move it.
I'm happy to second.
Want to arm wrestle?
No.
It's now then your choice, Jessica.
Okay, well, I have Board Member Sandoval moving and Board Member Winternitz second. I can do a roll.
Okay.
Chair Mashburn,
Aye.
Vice Chair Matsumoto,
Yes.
Supervisor Natoli,
Aye.
I have Supervisor Mitchoff is now absent. Supervisor Miller,
Yes.
Supervisor Provenza's absence. Board Member Miller. Gail, are you still with us? I'll come back. Board Member Cash.
Aye.
Board Member Winternitz.
Yes.
Board Member Sandoval.
Yes.
Board Member Miller. I'll abstain for the moment. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ayes. The motion carries.
Great. Thank you.
1 abstain.
Great. Can we move on to item 6? We have consideration of draft solicitation notices for climate resilience, community access, and natural resource protection funding, and nature-based solution wetland restoration funding. I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Good morning, board members. My name is Sarah Lesmeister, and I'm the Ecological and Community Programs Manager here at the Delta Conservancy. Today, I bring before you 2 draft solicitation notices, one for the climate resilience, community access, and public resources protection, and the second one for natural resource protection, nature-based solutions, wetland restoration funding. Sorry, there's a lot of resource protection in all these. This is agenda item 6, which is on page 50 of your board packet. So in September of this year, the Conservancy received a one-time general fund allocation of $6.125 million for the CAR projects, and then $36 million for the nature-based solution wetland restoration projects. To steward these funds, the Conservancy plans to use the general grant guidelines, which were approved in January of this year, and then with some of the proposed updates that were covered in the prior agenda item from this meeting. So used in tandem with the general grant guidelines, the solicitation notices provide necessary details to administer the funds, including the goals of the funding, the proposal submission process, timeline, and evaluation criteria. There are 2 separate solicitation notices since there are 2 different funding sources here. However, the programs will operate functionally in the same way. So we are proposing that these funding opportunities operate similar to the Conservancy's Proposition 68 program. The proposal process will be non-competitive, without a proposal submission deadline, and processed in 2 steps. The first step is a concept proposal, after which Conservancy staff will complete a viability assessment. And then applicants will be invited to work with the Conservancy staff and submit a full proposal if it looks good. Full proposals will be evaluated on criteria derived from both Proposition 1 and Proposition 68 grant programs. The specific details are outlined in agenda item 6.2 and 6.3. So the goals of the funding programs are unique to the funding source. Briefly, the CAR funding will be used to support multi-benefit projects that advance statewide initiatives to build climate resilience, expand outdoor access for all, and advance the state's 30 by 30 conservation goals. The nature-based solution, wetland restoration funding, will support restoration, conservation, and climate resilience for wetlands in the Delta and Sassoon Marsh. If approved, the solicitation notices will be posted online on the Conservancy's website and on the grants.ca.gov portal. Essentially, this will allow us to open these funding opportunities. So with that, I am happy to answer any of your questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions at this point. I do have some suggested motion language that I can read if you guys would like. I'm seeing head nodding. So move that the board approve the solicitation notices for climate resilience, community access, and natural resource protection, and nature-based solutions, wetland restoration funding.
We have a motion?
Nicole would move. Nicole would move.
Mashburn second.
Jessica's writing down the notes. There we go.
Thank you. I have Supervisor Natoli moving and Chair Mashburn as a second. I'll call roll. Chair Mashburn,
Aye.
Vice Chair Matsumoto,
Yes.
Supervisor Natoli,
Aye.
Joff is absent. Supervisor Miller,
Yes.
Board Member Miller. I'm gonna get that as absent.
I just heard from her and she said she was kicked off Teams for
Oh,
some
no.
reason.
Sad. I'm sorry about that. Hope, see if you can find her.
I'm telling her to try to sign back in.
Okay, thank you. Hope, keep an eye out for it. It might be a phone number. Board Member Cash. I'm going to continue with the vote. I'm sorry. Board Member Cash. Brian? Oh, it look, are you okay, I think he's frozen. Board Member Witternitz?
I'm
Yes.
back.
Board Member Cash?
Aye.
There we go. Board Member
There's
Sandoval?
Aye.
Board Member Miller? Did you get a chance to hear the motion? Gail, are you with us?
I did.
Oh, good.
I am because I joined from another. Sorry, Brian had to let me back in. I was kicked off. I apologize.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, not it's the world we live in. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 ayes. It's a unanimous vote. The motion carries.
Great. And now, do you want to do public comment before adjourning?
Yeah, we're obligated just to, yes, absolutely.
Any public comment out there? Not seeing any raised hands.
Okay.
Great. I think we can adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you everyone for taking the time and have a great holiday. And we look forward to seeing you in January. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.